Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the High Dragon's Breath Bow Wow, welcoming you back to another episode of Archon's Alternatives. Going back into our Helldivers 2 series. Sorry for the short break there, and for the odd appearance of my setup. I am recording, as mentioned, on a different computer. So, carry along with me as we talk about marksman rifles, sniper rifles, and energy weapons of Helldivers 2. Mostly focused upon primaries. But let's start with our marksman and sniper rifles. Honestly, when I first started playing the game, I considered these a little bit out of place as far as playstyle went. You know, having a sniper in a game where you're kiting 90% of the time, or at least where playing against certain factions you're kiting 90% of the time, seemed a little bit unreasonable to me. And I will admit, I have used quite a few of these weapons at different times in different scenarios, and I find that they fit a lot of specific playstyles that I don't necessarily embody. So, just a little bit of bias out of the way here. These don't fit my playstyle, but I'll do my best to be fair to them. The first one is the Plaz 39 Accelerator Rifle. It is very unique in that it is really the only true sniper's rifle on this list. Every single other design is either a primary rifle, like a bolt action or lever action, or is a semi-automatic DMR or designated marksman rifle. The Accelerator is the only true sniper rifle on this list, which is incredibly strange because it is a plasma weapon, and not only is it a unique plasma sniper rifle, it is also a plasma sniper rifle that fires in burst mode only. So, per magazine, the Plaz 39 Accelerator has three-round bursts, and it only has 8 magazines, giving it a total number of individual shots, aka you pull the trigger and it fires, of 24. Meaning that if you're firing at individual targets, you can only kill 24 of them. Granted, it is an incredibly high damage weapon, essentially being 3 full power plasma shots at the same target with a very small, or really a medium explosive area around it. However, this has some downsides. While it may have obvious downsides, being a slow-firing, burst-fire sniper rifle that is relatively unwieldy and pretty hard to use against hordes of enemies or in close combat, obviously, it is a sniper rifle, but it has a kind of hidden weakness, and that comes in its damage fall-off. Now, you would think with a sniper rifle, it's going to be doing damage out to extreme ranges, you know. If it has this limited ammo economy, of course that means it's going to be better for sniping off elite enemies at extreme ranges. Problem, the damage fallout for most weapons in Helldivers is pretty bad, and it doesn't get any better with the Plaz 39 Accelerator. It loses about 50% of its damage out at its maximum range, which means that you're not going to be sniping out random targets by insta-killing them with a body shot, especially if you're thinking about Devastators. Now, it is possible to aim for headshots, and the accuracy of the Plaz 39 does help with that, but you gotta understand that this fall off kind of limits what you can do in terms of long-range damage, and it might make you waste more ammunition, so this is almost a catch-22 of it does its maximum effective damage at close range, but it's not really designed for close-range combat. And then we get to the second issue with the Plaz 39, and really what was my biggest issue when I picked it up and used it was it's only AP3, which is a crime, in my opinion. Even for all of its damage, only having AP3 means that a lot of different, even moderately armored enemies like Devastators will have areas that it will bounce or fail to penetrate or have a hard time penetrating. Considering that this is accelerated plasma, I don't understand why it can't have more armor penetration. That would seem to me to make the most sense. If you're having it fire in bursts, of course, one burst melts the armor, the second one enters the target, and the third one explodes, or vice versa. That makes the most sense to me, but unfortunately the Plaz 39 as modeled in-game doesn't actually follow that format, which I guess is fine, and I can definitely see uses for this thing, but it just wasn't to my taste when I used it, especially because of the limited ammunition supply. And probably it would work best against the Illuminate, just because of the efficiency in taking down Overseers with one nice headshot or two nice body shots. But you need to keep around a secondary weapon that has the ammo economy that the Plas 39 lacks. So, pluses and minuses. And it can't really even serve in a dual-purpose role because it lacks the AP of 4 or 5 that would be needed to destroy heavily armored enemies like Hulks, that I think would make it far more effective as a all-round primary weapon, which it is. The next one is the the R63CS Diligence Counter Sniper. Now, the Diligence Counter Sniper is essentially a much larger, more anti-materiel version of the R63 Diligence. I don't like either of these, but of the two of them, I do like the Counter Sniper more, because it fits more easily into the role that it looks like it's designed for. It has 15 rounds, which is pretty generous for an anti-materiel rifle, and it's firing a high-velocity version of the standard 9x70mm rounds that the Diligence fires. Now, if you don't know a lot about bullets, 9mm by 70mm, that's a 9mm bullet, as you would expect out of a pistol, but it's being fired out of a 70mm cartridge, which is very long, probably about double the length of a standard pistol cartridge. Which means that given some extra oomph and some nice powder, or some nice increased pressure in the ammunition, the Counter Sniper is hitting at a very solid clip. However, its ammo economy, while better than the Plasma Accelerator, is not as good as the Diligence. It only has 6 extra magazines at 15 rounds apiece. Now, that's significantly more than the 24 total shots that the Plas 39 allows you, but it's not as good as the 8 spare magazines with 25 rounds that the Diligence grants you. So why do I like the Counter Sniper more? Well, AP of 3. That's the really big difference, in my opinion, between the Diligence and the Diligence Counter Sniper. It has a very good middle ground feeling to it, in that it's not really something that you can fan the trigger with because of its low ammunition per magazine, but with good sights, a decent amount of accuracy, and a solid amount of planning, and some decent movement ability, you can take down a lot of enemies at long range. Now, for myself, I would only use this against the bots. It could be useful against bugs, but the real issue there is that there's a lot more bugs that you need to kill in any one mission, and they will be coming up much closer to you than the bots will, making the Diligence Counter Sniper very effective at taking out specific, well-armored enemies with headshots or with a couple of body shots. So I really consider it a solid middle ground rifle, and while I really consider it more of a DMR than a sniper's rifle, the game considers it a sniper rifle. So it's up here. I like it a lot, but I don't take it very often because, I play a lot of different maps, and I don't like to change around my primaries and ruin my muscle memory. The next one is its kind of younger cousin, or I guess older brother, the R63 Diligence. Like I said, 25 rounds of 9x70mm full metal jacket ammo. Now, it has 8 spare magazines, giving it significantly more ammunition economy than the Diligence Counter Sniper, but it only has armor penetration of 2, light armor pen. That's a problem. It's effectively an M1 carbine or an M14 style rifle, and in my opinion, it rewards those who have absolute nerves of steel. You need to be absolutely gut sure of your accuracy and your consistency under pressure, because the Diligence lends itself to this M14 style of combat. It's useful at long range for sure, but the higher ammunition capacity and the higher ammo economy encourages you to take it on a lot more different missions. For example, the Diligence Counter Sniper may excel against bots for its armor penetration, but against bugs or against the Illuminate, I would never take the Diligence Counter Sniper. I would take the Diligence because I need that ammo to mow down hordes consistently and with decent damage and accuracy. Now, Is there a problem with that? Well, yeah, there's some recoil issues there, and of course, if you don't have those nerves of steel to maintain accuracy under pressure, you're going to get overwhelmed because this gun lacks any higher rate of fire. It's still semi-automatic, for the most part. So it works as not necessarily the middle ground all-rounder that the counter sniper does, but it has a playstyle that just isn't necessarily for me. I could definitely understand where it comes in, especially for bug players, people who see bugs and just want to be able to snipe out their weak spots, or want to be able to have a weapon that will consistently put down both types of enemies, but rewards them for engaging at longer range, kind of a ranger or scout type build. I could even see this being very useful for bug divers who like to run the jetpack a lot, and I do see that very often. People love running the jetpack. Running the jetpack with the diligence makes a lot of sense because, well, if you jump away from the enemy and then you scope in with the diligence, you can consistently whittle down hordes of the enemy and keep ahead of them. And with the increased ammo economy, it makes a lot more sense. So, speaking of throwing the ammo economy out of the window, the R6 Deadeye, the funny cowboy gun. These are firing 8mm high-velocity rounds with AP3. Now again, is the Deadeye a higher velocity weapon than the Diligence? In my opinion, probably not. Why they give it AP3, in my opinion, is probably because it's using big, fat steel rounds of 8mm, essentially thicker bullets, kind of like 44 Magnum shells out of a long rifle barrel, even like 4570 government. So while it's not necessarily traveling faster than the R36's rounds, it is at least much heavier in terms of weight of bullet, and it also is probably made out of steel or something of that nature. So it does have that AP3 that I love so much out of my guns. It only has 8 rounds per magazine though, and they are reloading rounds. Now, is 8 rounds a lot? No, not for most guns. Is 8 rounds a lot for a shotgun? No. Is 8 rounds a lot for a sniper rifle? Well, we have one with 15 rounds up here, so I would say no. What makes the Deadeye so good is really its ability to fire quickly and its ability to keep consistently loaded. Essentially, the Diligence counter sniper has a lot more recoil and it fires a little bit more slowly than the Deadeye, which means that the Deadeye can pretty effectively be a medium-range weapon with the option to go longer range like the Diligence. So in a straight-up comparison between the two of them, I think I would probably prefer the Deadeye just because it has more options with range, and of course it does significantly more damage. I'm not sure exactly how much, but it's a good, solid wallop compared to the other guns that gives it the ability to more consistently kill enemies without having to hit direct headshots or weak spots. So yeah, funny cowboy gun goes chick-chick. It does only have 60 extra rounds, which puts it ammo economy as a little bit worse than the Diligence counter sniper, especially because of its small ammunition capacity in terms of its magazine. But since the rounds reload and you don't have to mess around with like reloading a whole mag, it's not too bad. Again, your opinion whether you like rounds reloading or not, I don't really care. Honestly, I think they're both okay. Especially the ability to cancel the animation to reload with the Diligence or with the Deadeye can both be good. The big advantage with the Deadeye is just its damage and its AP3. It hits like a frickin' truck, and it smashes with even more damage than the counter sniper. So, there's your 4 mainline rifles. And then we have the kind of weirdo off in the corner that I actually used the most when I played Helldivers 2. The R2124 Constitution. It's a Lee Enfield, or kind of a Mark 1909 rifle if you want. It is a bolt-action, 8mm high-velocity, 5-round stripper clip, 99-round reserve bolt-action rifle. The Constitution is basically free for everyone, and in my opinion, it was an attempt by the game to give every single person a taste of what AP3 could do. And penetrating medium armor makes a massive difference in this game, especially for me as a bot diver. The difference between not having penetration 3 and having penetration 3 is basically the difference between being able to play on level 5 difficulty and up to level 7, 8, and 9 difficulty. So the Constitution is almost like a stepping stone for bot divers, or you could argue it's also a rite of passage. Because bot divers don't have to have fully automatic fire as much, it's not a necessity. We can run around with sniper rifles much more easily than you bug divers can, and significantly more easily than you illuminate divers can, if any of you exist. But the Constitution feeds into this mentality, the idea of consistently picking off a single target at a time, sniping down individual bots, and basically plugging 3, 4, 5 rounds into the same Devastator to knock it out. Because of this weird kind of one-off weapon that they did, it has incredibly good ammo economy. 99 extra rounds, significantly more than the Deadeye, and even though it does less damage, between number one, having a funny bayonet, and also being a little bit easier to aim and use, in my opinion, because ADSing with it is very intuitive. It fires from the hip very accurately, and you work the straight pull bolt really, really quick. It's not too bad. Like, you would think it's a useless weapon, but if you've never experienced Armor Penetration 3, and then you pick up the Constitution for the first time, well, for me, it was just a revelation. After I picked up the Constitution, I could not imagine myself playing the game ever, no matter where I was going, what front I was dropping on. I couldn't imagine myself playing the game without an AP3 weapon. And really, that's all that I think the Constitution was. It was a little taste for everyone of how good AP3 was, because a lot of people were using submachine guns. A lot of people were using secondaries and pistols. A lot of people were using shotguns that had no penetration. And the Constitution gave people, especially bot divers in my opinion, just that little taste of how good AP3 could be. And from then, for myself, I have never been able to live using an AP2 weapon. But yeah, it is essentially useless against every faction except the bots, and even against the bots, it is the bottom tier, just above some weapons that are absolutely useless against bots. So, definitely a meme, definitely not great, but with its weirdly good ammo economy, and with its oddly niche use against the bots in that manner by having armor penetration, it is quite an impressive firearm if you've never used it. I recommend it just for fun. So, moving on to energy weapons. We have quite a few here, including my absolute favorite gun in the game. The first one is the Plaz 101 Purifier. It is this one up here, kind of the rifle version of the plasma weapons, and it uses a very kind of eclectic mix of vacuum tubes and copper wiring and satchels and springs to make this look, in my opinion, a little bit more busy than it really needs to. Could have been a little bit more smoother, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the design, and I'm also not a big fan of the Plaz 101 in general, which is odd, because I usually like plasma weapons, and laser weapons, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of this one. It has 15 rounds per magazine, and 6 magazines, so it has the ammunition economy of a sniper rifle, and it's AP3. What's not to like? Well, here's what's not to like. It is a charge-up explosive primary. Now, I have my problems with some of the plasma weapons in this game doing either friendly fire damage or damage to yourself, and the Purifier has two things going against it. One, it is the plasma weapon that is most reliant upon the explosion, and two, it's a charge-up weapon in a game where enemies are constantly running at you and constantly trying to murder you at dead close range. In most scenarios, the Plasma 1 Purifier, in my experience, did not have enough rate of fire to keep up with the sheer amount of bugs, bots, or zombies trying to tear me to pieces. So while I tried it a few times, I really did want it to work, believe me, because I thought the idea of a handheld plasma grenade launcher was really cool. I did not have as much satisfaction as I was expecting with it, and with its low ammunition capacity, I was basically kind of stumped. I really did not like it as a primary. I can certainly understand that there are builds that are useful for it, but considering how plasma works in this game, the kind of slower ball-type trajectory, a little bit like Doom plasma weapons, if you remember Doom 2016, it reminds me of that very heavily, the like wavery orb of plasma. Because of that, and because of the AoE damage that the Purifier will often do to you, in addition to your enemy, I did not like it as much, even with that AP3. So I moved on to its little brother, which is the Plas 1 Scorcher. Now, the Plas 1 Scorcher is essentially a plasma submachine gun. It's got an AP of 3, 20 rounds, 5 spare magazines. That's a lot. Basically 80 plus rounds of ammunition of AP3, and it's fully automatic. Now, this thing really does act like a submachine gun. Decent stagger, small explosive radius, high damage, high AP. I understand that it's a bit of a meta pick, but I love the Plas 1 Scorcher. It is my pick of guns against every single faction. Against hordes, it absolutely melts them with the explosive damage and by being fully automatic. It has decent enough accuracy if you learn to fire at medium range, and its ammo economy, while it isn't great at stock, I always run cinder block and reinforced so that I can give myself an extra magazine, and that extra magazine is often all it takes for the Scorcher to deal with anything on the map for long enough for you to get more ammunition, essentially. The Plas 1 Scorcher has been carrying me through every single mission, basically since I picked it up, and it's incredibly effective against almost every faction. So while before I would say that a lot of different guns in the Marksman and Sniper Rifle would work against different factions, I would take the Diligence Counter Sniper against bots, I would take the standard Diligence against bugs, and then the Deadeye is probably best against either bugs or the Illuminate. This is the only weapon, the Plas 1 Scorcher is the only weapon that I can actually recommend against every single faction in the game. Now, it does have some drawbacks. I think the biggest one that I found is that against the Predator Strain Stalkers and the big Predator Strain, Warriors, it has barely enough damage to kill them at medium range. If there's more than one, you have to jump away, but if it's just one, and if you get a little bit of distance on them, you can absolutely kill them with the Plas 1 Scorcher, and you can kill a second one as well. So it works well. That armor penetration is great. It deletes most regular bugs. The only ones that it struggles with are the Predator Strain, because its rate of fire is not incredibly high, and it has relatively low stagger, even with the explosive. So, outside of that, if you bring some extra ammo modifications on your armor, it's incredibly good. Against the Illuminate, it's great. It shreds Overseers, basically without them getting a chance to touch you. And while it struggles a little bit against the Voteless when they're at close range, at medium range, it shreds them. No problem. And against the bots, it's not even a comparison. It staggers the bots, it weakens them, it has huge armor penetration, the explosions double back on your enemies. It's practically the perfect bot weapon. I know a lot of people are big fans of the double-edged sickle. The double-edged sickle, or the double-edged scythe, in my opinion, they're interchangeable. I've used both. The Scorcher is the double-edged sickle, except you don't have to worry about, setting yourself on fire, or you don't have to worry about ammunition. So, kind of the back and forth. Do you find yourself running out of ammo more, or do you find yourself not wanting to light yourself on fire? So, it's just a trade-off, and for me personally, because you have that extra that armor passive that gives you an extra magazine, basically, I am always going to take the Plas 1 Scorcher. It's incredibly good. I hope they never nerf it, because it's so fun. But yeah, it's a meta weapon. I know I'm going to get crap for picking it, but I love it a lot. If you ever see me running around with the Scorcher, just know that's why. The next one up is the Las 16 Scythe. Now, the Scythe and the Sickle are a little odd, and I've mislabeled them here. So there's two different types, and they look very similar as well. Essentially, one of them is the Sickle. It's this one here. So the Sickle and the Scythe. The Scythe is a single armor penetration 2 beam that has infinite ammunition, and you just need to keep holding down the trigger on your target until either they die or it overheats. You'd want to try and not overheat it because you have a limited amount of heat sinks. The biggest advantage of all these beam weapons is they never run out of ammo. Essentially, infinite ammo means you can kill infinite things. The alt side of the sickle and scythe dynamic is the sickle. The sickle has individual beams of AP2. Essentially, it's a fully automatic version of the scythe, where instead of a constant, consistent beam that you have to drag along different targets, it's a pew 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 pew. Lots of little lasers that go out to a further distance and don't burn through the heatsink as quickly. You can kind of burst fire with the scythe much more easily than you can, burst fire with the scythe much more easily than you can with the sickle, with the beam. Now, I'm going to get them mixed up so much because I've written them down the wrong way. I'm sorry. But the difference between these is essentially, do you want those individual shots, which you can kind of tap fire at specific enemies, keeping your heat much lower, and then theoretically, once you have to really dump on an opponent, it'll heat up faster, I suppose. Or do you want a weapon that has more beam power and kind of consistent damage, but it has a harder time picking off those little enemies? You kind of got to wiggle it around on the ground, and if you don't connect with the enemy for long, it doesn't do a ton of damage. So that's kind of the difference there. Do you want something that's constant but kind of low damage, or do you want something that's consistent damage and it just has some issues with overheating? Now, what is better than both of those things? Since they're both AP2, obviously it would be a weapon that has much better armor penetration. Here comes the LAS-17 double-edged sickle, or double-edged scythe. It has individual beams, like the scythe, or like the sickle, but it has increasing armor penetration as it heats up. Now, the game describes this as essentially a sickle that you've stripped all of the components off of, and it doesn't protect you from any of the heat that it generates, but it allows you to fire it for considerably longer amounts of time because it's kind of air-cooled. This, as a result, allows you to get armor penetration 3 once you've fired for a few seconds with the weapon. Now, you do have to keep it pretty hot in order to get that armor penetration, but it's not that bad because these are individual shots and you can pretty much fire consistently because, again, infinite ammo. On the negative side, you do light yourself on fire, and this does burn you. Now, for most people, this came out and it was a great weapon. You're telling me I can get an AP3 weapon that basically never runs out of ammunition, and all I have to do is equip a type of armor that gives me a 30% lower damage from fire. Not bad. My problem with the double-edged sickle and why I did not use it as much, because I did use it for a little bit, but the reason I didn't use it as much was because I really like having kind of that punchy kinetic impact weapon that the Plas1 Scorcher provides. Now, it isn't that the double-edged sickle has bad kinetic impact or low damage. The problem I had was that if an enemy that has armor is already up on me, the double-edged sickle doesn't actually penetrate their armor until you've fired off a few shots. Now, that's not too much of a problem, but it's the same issue that I have with flame weapons or with arc weapons. That charge up period, that limitation where I can't do instantaneous kind of twist and fire damage, it's a limiter for me, and it's one of the reasons I don't like the double-edged sickle as much. Again, I totally understand why you guys enjoy lighting yourselves on fire and just kind of blazing away with your golden lasgun, but I prefer my Scorcher just personally. But I definitely understand it. It is a pretty cool weapon. The design is really incredible. It's really got this kind of retro 80s space gun look to it, especially with like the blue laser crystal and the golden foil. It's very cool. But it's not my favorite thing in the world. The next one up is the Arc 12 Blitzer. Now, the Blitzer actually was really, really interesting to me as a concept for fighting bugs. Unfortunately, it fell a little bit short in my estimation. Now, there are definitely better players than me, and there are definitely better ways to use the Blitzer than I was using it, but here's effectively how it works. It charges up, much like the arc rifle, and it has infinite ammunition. But it doesn't charge up and fire, it charges up to a point, and then you can release it, and it hits up to 5 targets with a stunning electrical strike that does a little bit less damage than a lot of the other arc weapons, and less damage than most shotguns. It's not terrible, it is especially good at taking out medium and light armored enemies, but even though it has AP3, I found its stun time to be very, very short, basically instantaneous. It would save you a fraction of a second, essentially just a tiny little stumble. It wasn't really going to zap enemies into non-compliance, and that was one of the big issues I had with it. I would often get myself into situations with the Blitzer while I was trying to use it, where I would run away from bugs, I would turn, I would charge, I would fire, and then I would move to charge again, and they were already closing the distance, essentially. Now, it could make good damage, and the jumping was great, it killed off all the little bugs quite fine, but that AP3 and that low stun time, yeah, it didn't seem like it was taking down even medium bugs like chargers with all that level of speed. Sorry, not the big chargers, but like the alphas, basically. Now, that might just be a me problem, a skill issue. I could certainly agree with that, but the Blitzer also has limited range. It definitely is shorter. You certainly can't hit anything at real medium range, kind of that 20, 30, 40 meter mark. And with bugs, that's kind of where you start encountering them, so you kind of have to run at them and then start running away from them, because the Blitzer can't get out consistent damage. It's only able to fire every couple of seconds as you charge the weapon. Now, I think the idea of, again, an infinite ammo AP3 weapon is cool and all, but the thing that I would really, really love changed about the Blitzer is that you didn't have to let go of the cursor for it to fire. Because effectively how it works now, like with the arc rifle, is you hold down on the trigger, and then once the quote-unquote uprights of the sight kind of come together and it charges up a shot, then you have to let go manually in order for it to fire. What I would really love, and what would make me use this weapon way, way more, is if it just fired instantaneously upon it finishing the charge up, because it already auto-targets the closest enemy and zaps them, so I don't really care about it lighting up anything away from me. I think the only reason that they're not having us do that is both to keep it balanced, but also because the arc rifle already does that. So I think that's a change that should be made, and if that was made as a change, I would use the Blitzer a lot more with bugs. So, the SG-8P Punisher Plasma. It is a plasma shotgun. It has a couple of unique eccentricities about it as a plasma weapon. It has no explosions, which is unlike every single other plasma weapon in the game. And it only has 8 rounds per magazine, which is half of that of a normal Punisher shotgun. Again, it is a plasma weapon, so it's not all that bad. But it also has only 8 magazines, which, again, is on par for a shotgun, but given that those magazines are only holding half as much ammo, in my opinion, this is a harsh trade-off. It does a lot of damage, that's true, a lot of damage, but that kind of semi-automatic, kind of quote-unquote pump or like semi-auto shots, yeah, I had a real issue when I was using this where it would be, you shoot, it kind of takes a second, and then you shoot again. It is very punishing to try and use this weapon in kind of a panicked manner, and it's much more punishing if you miss your shots, because you have much more limited ammo. Kind of the issue that I had with the Purifier, it's slower, you have less shots, you have worse ammo economy, but it does an absolute ton of damage. The SG-8P Punisher hits like a truck, but you have to actually hit your target very consistently because you can't afford to waste ammunition, unlike the Plasma and Scorcher, which has plenty of fully auto ammo to go around, especially if you bring some extra. Now, was there any other problems with the Punisher? I don't really think so. I think it's good for players that like that kind of up-in-your-face shotgun energy, and because it's a shotgun, it doesn't have the explosive problem that the Purifier has. So in comparison to something like the Slugger, I think it actually is a little bit better than most shotguns, and the AP is again on par with much of the plasma weaponry. So against what factions would these be used? Again, I'm going to leave the Scorcher off this list because in my opinion, it's the only primary in all of Helldivers that you can bring against every single enemy and it'll be relatively good against every single one. The only other one that I found that was pretty good against all of them was the Liberator Penetrator, but those two are kind of remarkably similar except for the Scorcher having objectively better damage and less recoil. So, against the bugs, I think the best possible option is probably either the Scythe or the Sickle, depending upon which you like. Again, if they made that change to the Arc 12 Blitzer, I would use it against bugs 100%, because I like the idea of zapping lots of targets with AP3 weapons. That sounds great. Problem, it's too slow and clunky to actually use as a primary. Heavy weapon, sure, whatever, but it's too slow in my opinion, and that whole lock up and charge thing, where it doesn't release upon it being ready to fire, that's a problem for me that I just need that changed before I really commit to it. But for most bug divers, I really do approve of bringing the Scythe and the Sickle. The Sickle because it's fast firing and you can stab out at little guys much more easily. The Scythe because as long as you have an enemy in your sights, you can melt them down with pretty high energy damage, making it very effective against lots of enemies, and of course, compensating for bad aim, because if you just draw a line across a target, you will be guaranteed to hit it, which is also very effective against flying enemies. However, it does have some issues when it comes to armored or charging enemies, in which case bring the Senator or an armor-piercing secondary that you can switch to pretty consistently and keep loaded. The other thing is infinite ammo is great against bugs. And, double-edged sickle, kind of the same thing with the Scythe, or with the Scorcher. It has a lot of different good matchups. Against the bots, I think the best one I could recommend would be the double-edged sickle. The double-edged sickle, or the double-edged scythe, again, depending on what the actual name is, I forget, or rather I mix them up all the time. The really good thing about this is that you can have the consistent range that you don't get with bugs, and that you don't really get with the Illuminate all that well, and it's pretty good at heating itself up to the point where it can kill heavier enemies. So it has that advantage of being able to individually shoot out other targets like its smaller brother, but it also has the option to kind of go full bore mode and burn out some bots. Now, it does have the disadvantage of lighting you on fire, but here's the thing. If you're playing against the Incineration Core, you're already going to probably have on some armor that protects you against fire. Pretty reasonable, then, that you would bring a weapon that already sets you on fire if you're intending to be shot by flaming weapons anyway. Pretty solid. Not bad at all. Against the Illuminate, honestly, I can't recommend any energy weapons too highly, other than the Plasma and Scorcher, of course. With the Punisher Plasma, it's better against bots, and it's absolutely useless against crowds because it lacks explosive. With the Sickle and the Scythe, yeah, they're good, but they don't excel in the way that I would expect of other weapons. The Double-Edged Sickle is good, but considering the amount of damage they're going to be taking from various different targets, and the fact that it's individual shots and not a beam, it could be harder to hit flying enemies. For that reason, my best recommendation would actually probably be the Plas 101 Purifier, or the Double-Edged Sickle if you can't get access to it. I say the Purifier because it has effective options against both types of enemies. Against the slower moving Voteless, the explosive effect isn't as bad as it is against bugs who are always up in your face. You can usually catch the Voteless with at least 1 to 2 rounds before they get into close combat with you. And against the Overseers, the Plas 101 is brutal, and it can knock them out in only 2 or 3 consistently fired shots. And while I had issues with its accuracy, I'm sure if you spent a little bit more time with it than I did, you can consistently hit those Overseers, so that would be my recommendation for the Illuminate. So, that is the end of our first video. Sorry about the weird aspect ratio and the kind of under-recording there, and I'm also sorry about the whole my computer's in the shop thing. It is a little bit difficult as I kind of spend what little time I have out of school trying to get my rig back up and ready, but it should be prepped within the next 5 or so days, maybe a little bit longer. With those upgrades, I will hopefully be able to stream a lot more and play some more games for you guys, maybe some more game recordings. It would be nice to be able to maybe do some Let's Play stuff if you guys were interested in certain games. But other than that, I have a lot of content for you guys coming up, including another video today. Yes, that's a double header. So I will wish you all a lovely good night.